I think one of the things that hopefully you were able to see is myself, the rest of my team, we got a lot of passion around systems management. There's a lot of things that we still have to do. Like the feedback that you guys gave me about the bigger picture, and all I can say is that I am involved in some other teams at Dell to look at that bigger picture. If you can think about the data protection piece, the server piece, the storage piece, kind of the, what we used to call CPSD, our converged platform teams, and the amount of management solutions that kind of existed out there. Tying all those things together is going to be a little bit longer as we go through what we're doing from a full software-defined data center type of environment. But again, I think if you were to look at the things that we're doing, just bringing the concepts on as far as this thing around, it's not a compute node anymore, this really is an infrastructure node. Starting to comprehend that. You mentioned earlier about understanding what the OS and things that are running on a server, how does iDRAC know those things? We do get an OS information. However, I want to go further. If somebody builds a software-defined device, iDRAC should have awareness as to what that is, right? So that we are not doing things such as breaking that type of environment, so that we fully comprehend how all these things are working. What we didn't cover was some of the things we do from an open managed integration into VMware's vCenter and how we integrate into vRealize already from an operations management. You know, there's the automation piece that we're also, so there is a much broader space when you start looking at what we are trying to do. If you look at all of my pieces, and remember, I come from a clustering background, right? To me, systems management is nothing more than a bunch of cluster pieces that you're putting together. You're managing them, but it also means the software pieces have to all work together. So you heard Ray talking about how Repository Manager works with Enterprise, Open Managed Enterprise, works with our integrations with System Center, works with the Open Managed integration for VMware vCenter, right? Works with all of our different products from an iDRAC perspective. 7 years ago, I'm not sure you would have seen all these tightly knitted pieces to make a management solution at that server level. Again, as I said, the direction I've taken my team now is start thinking of these things as infrastructure nodes, because that's really what they are. And that is the direction we really are heading down. And some of the things, if you heard the VxRail, understanding of VxRail, I personally, at this point, am not the right person to be managing a VxRail environment, but monitoring it, being able to launch the management tools was the first step for having that first, I guess, glass of pain that you guys referred to, right? But it is a methodology, because if you think about it, and even the usage model, think about what somebody's doing in the data center. I kind of mentioned this earlier. What is the most important thing people want to know about their infrastructure? Is it healthy? They want to monitor it.
Before
right?
that, is it alive?
Is it alive? They want to monitor it, right? They need to understand, and then what kind of performance, health performance. There's the health, and then there's the performance information that you're kind of monitoring to see if there are issues. That is why Open Managed Enterprise is that central point as we start looking at what we want to be able to do. We do storage today as far as monitoring storage devices. We do monitor network switches. We do monitor, we talked about this, if there's a MIB, and I don't know, Brian, did you mention this at all? We talked a little bit about being able to manage third-party devices, right? You can install that third-party MIB. So I can now monitor somebody else's storage devices, somebody else's switch devices. That's the simplest and the easiest thing that we could start implementing as we looked at this. So I think one of the things, if we get an opportunity to talk to you guys again, we will lay out that entire vision. We'll probably even have more details as we continue to work with the rest of Dell EMC to make sure that we can paint that picture. Right now, my biggest thing is, and I am about predictability and where I am going, right? So sharing that we are looking at that build environment from a vSAN perspective. So as somebody builds out a vSAN environment, which again, think about that software-defined storage type of environment, my plugin will understand that. It will understand from a cataloging perspective what my stack consists of, because when you get into that vSAN, it's all the way down to that drive and the firmware on the drive, and then being able to do cluster-wide updates on those things. So in a cluster-wide update, remember the availability thing that I mentioned from a tenant perspective? Our integration that we do will actually do that round robin as it's updating each one of those nodes. I did a presentation for my general manager a couple of years ago when we first introduced this. I ran a VDI environment, presented to him before I kicked off my presentation, or before I started my presentation. I showed him I was going to update a 4-node cluster that my presentation was running on. Clicked go, my presentation never stopped. 100% perceived availability to my general manager. Got done with the presentation a half hour later and was able to show that every single system now had the new BIOS on it. My presentation never went down. And he was like, wow, I always thought you guys did things around automation for efficiencies and things. I said, no, this is the availability feature that we're trying to drive. So similarly, when you start thinking about vSAN environments have a lot of other things that you have to look at. There are timings with inside vSAN that if you don't have that node up, or if it's down for a certain amount of time, it starts rebuilding that metadata. We have to be able to change that timing that people need to understand what's going on, right? So we can't have a rebuild take place and all of a sudden it starts taking, or an update to the cluster, and all of a sudden it starts rebuilding the metadata because it thought it was a node was down for more than an hour. So we are comprehending some of those things. And that may not have come across in the presentation, but to me, that's thinking about that software-defined data center and how things are happening.
Yeah, I understand how he's high on the list of things to support around here. But I might want some way to manually tell you, this is software, this server is running software-defined storage. Treat it like storage, not like software.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you want to automatically identify all these things, but you're always going to be behind. New software is going to come out that you haven't put in your database. And I just want to go, these 6 servers, those are storage servers. Be really careful before you reboot those suckers.
Yes. And again, I think that even a model where you could self-identify what these are.
Yeah,
and
that's all I'm asking for at this stage.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe like a tagging infrastructure.
Yeah.
Inside of an enterprise.
Yeah, and tags that, you know, user-defined tags that are just for me, but also tags that mean don't reboot without explicit permission because this server can't evacuate all of its workloads before automatically.
Yeah, that's interesting because our current policies about what to do when something happens, we could have potentially policies of what not to do, ever.
Right.
Oh, sorry, you can't reboot that system. It's set to non-reboot policy or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's good.
it's yeah. So one of the things that we actually have, and early on, so we have a lot of OEM customers that buy Dell servers and wind up building their own
noticed.
appliances, right? We actually, so when we took that vRealize environment, we kind of put it through the same type of philosophy we did with OEM. One of the things we have with inside the iDRAC is something we call the personality module. Personality module means we can change it from looking like a R730 or an R740, and it can become some new platform. So it's identified differently. In this case, we use it to identify it. It's a vRealize box because as it's shipped out of the factory, they were able to have this product ID in there. Similarly with our XC platforms. There is a thought process, how would I, in that build environment, so remember, I have to think, from my perspective, the build versus the buy. I want both customers because I want to sell more Dell servers. Is there the opportunity to give the customer that opportunity to select what this server is and have it give it its own personality, right? So now looking at things a little bit, so yes, the thoughts are there on how we could do this. Great for my team to hear this. Anything else? You guys all ready for beer?
That's not even a question.
Is that a rhetorical question?
Can we drink beer as we do the tour?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I will not be able to join for beers.
Oh.
And as you can tell, I do like my beer.
We'll miss you.
Yes, so have a few on me.
I'm sure someone will have your show.
Yes, please do. Any other comments, questions? Guys excited about at least the tools we were able to show?
Major
They've
improvement.
come a long way.
Last
Yeah.
time I looked at this was 7 years ago, and you guys have come.
Thank you. You know how
a
long I've been in charge of this program?
Yeah,
7
well,
years.
yeah.